Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We're not starting too late, but it's nice to have just held it off a little bit to make sure that everybody who is arriving has arrived, although here they come, more of them. Hello, welcome. My name is Jude Kelly. I'm the Artistic Director of the Southbank Centre, and we are really thrilled that this is our third WOW year. I know, hooray, a mooted hooray, but I know you're all thinking that. Yeah. You don't think I was fishing, do you? Anyway, we had the most extraordinary day on Thursday because we had a day, the WOW Education Day. We had over 400 young people, mainly girls but some boys, considering in great passion and great detail how and you would create a gender equality curriculum for the UK and beyond, because you may know this, but there are no gender equality elements to the curriculum formally in any country in the world. And although individual head teachers may introduce very, very strong ideas into schools for that purpose, it's rare. And the other thing that they talked about very passionately was, with all due respect, what is the point of only educating girls to gender equality? Don't boys also have the right to be educated around these topics, which of course they do and must? So the result of that, this is our second year of doing WOW Education, is that there's a very strong committee now been formed of head teachers, educationalists, including pupils and students. And they're really determined that in a couple of years they will be able to introduce a sort of hot out, like an R&D version, a blueprint version of a gender equality curriculum to trial in a number of schools. And they'll twin with schools in other parts of the world as well to do appropriate versions in this trial. So I think that's a very exciting step. Yesterday, we had another extraordinary day, which began with Sarah Brown, or it actually began with Stephanie Flanders talking about the economy very cogently and the impact the worldwide economy has on women's ability to be independent in the economy and also to contribute to the economy in the best way possible. And the impact, obviously, of the current economic crisis on the UK, particularly part-time workers. 77% of all part-time workers are women. And just a quick show of hands, actually, who has a part-time job here? And the sort of notion that part-time work isn't as necessary, isn't as financially critical to somebody, is common parlance, I have found. And that's a very disturbing thing for women trying to deal with work-life balance, or indeed having two part-time jobs, which is often the case. But the other element of the morning was Malala's father, Malala Yousafzai, who, as you know, was had an attempted assassination by the Taliban. Her activism, both before she had the attack and then the impact of the attack, has produced an extraordinary commitment, we hope, in Pakistan to girls' education. And Gordon Brown, as UN Global Envoy for Education, is carrying that message across the world. And it really did give me a sense of optimism that the agenda around the impact of educating girls and women, that is a key to greater financial stability and wealth, and also greater social stability, which inevitably produces growth of the right kind, let's hope. I really did begin to feel that this agenda was growing in a way that was no longer, a woman's issue. That took us into areas, of course, about violence. Violence as a weapon of war, violence as endemic rape, violence as a sort of right in terms of a woman as a piece of property in marriage. We had some discussion around child brides, around sexual trafficking, around enforced labour, and so on. But this happened last year as well in WOW. I don't know if you remember, if those of you were here, but Laura Listwood, who is the advisor on diversity to the Obama regime, talked about the fact that every single department in the United States now takes girls' and women's education as being key to them delivering their policies across all departments. And certainly we had a letter from William Hague on Friday supporting the Women of the World Conference, wishing us well, and a further letter from Justine Greening talking about their determination to try to put the British government's weight behind the issue of violence in warfare against women. So I think there is a reason to feel that what is currently being called the next wave of feminism. I'm even hearing people calling themselves a feminist. Gordon Brown called himself a feminist. Go Gordon, is what I say. I even feel that that word, which still, of course, for many, and some of you here, has presented quandaries. So I'm not suggesting that you must badge up this second, but nevertheless, there was a feeling that the idea, at least of equality for women being something which is a global agenda, a sensible, important, critical agenda for everyone, there is a sense that that is coming on stream. And that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Because the whole point of creating the WOW Festival is to celebrate the achievements of women and the issues around women. And of course, many of those achievements are done hand in hand with men who also believe that this is natural, this is the civilized next step. The tone of WOW, generally, we try to make a combination of and humor. I was asked yesterday, why did I like being a woman? I can't remember what I said, actually. But I know that one of the things I pointed to was that there are so many bizarre and weird things that have happened to you as a girl and as a woman with regard to, people talking about you as if you're an object and defining you, and also some terrible things that you witness, that you have to have a sense of humor. And it's a good thing. So the WOW Festival relies on people, yes, being earnest and determined, but also having the chance to relax and have fun. Angelique Kidjo, who will join us this morning, gave a wonderful bit of advice last night to a 2,500-seater audience. She sort of said, look, address the problems. When they get a bit tough, go away and have a lot of fun, and then come back, because the problems aren't going to go away, but you'll feel better when you get back to them. So that is part of the WOW philosophy. Have fun. Your early risers, so, in a way, you've got the seats, and so you should have. As the day goes on, I can tell you, it's going to get fuller and fuller. The multiple choices that you have through the day might mean that if you don't get to a room early, it's already bunged full and you can't get in. Please accept that as a matter of life. We can either have a number of people to this conference that fit the smallest room so that nobody will be disappointed, or we get the maximum number of women possible with all the rooms we've got. So try to feel flexible. You might end up discussing women in the rugby match, but this is a good thing, I can promise you. Because one of the best sessions last year, and it will be again, was about women in sport. Hands up who here does sport. That's good, that's good, that's good, great. Hands up who says, I don't like sport. Right, now you're not allowed to say that anymore. Because you're not allowed, okay? Not allowed to say things like, I don't like this and I don't like that. And not unless you've done it extensively and then tried it and thought, no, not for me. But anyway, even if you don't like sport, you need to support women who are determined to be footballers, for example. Because it's all the same story about inhibitions, inappropriateness, lack of opportunities, lack of money, etc. The same story throughout. So it's very fascinating to go to things that you didn't expect to be interested in. Some housekeeping notes as well. As I say, we haven't got Michael Kimmel this morning. He's unwell, he had an ear infection, he couldn't fly from Canada, but we have got Michael Kaufman for A Guy's Guide to Feminism in the next session, and he's a tremendous person to listen to. So we're sorry about one Michael, but we've still got the other Michael. And I think that's probably, oh yes, please go down to Spirit Level, down there. It's called Spirit Level, to be absolutely truthful, because it is a dingy basement. And we've called it Spirit Level in order to raise its spirits. But what is down there is Creative Connections, who are a wonderful group who draw up pictures and words of all the sessions, and we'd like you to add in to those sessions. And in fact, Tim's back there. Why don't you come around here, Tim? Come around here. And while Tim's walking down here, there is also a tremendous historical photographic record of the Chiswick, the first refuge, first domestic violence refuge that Erin Pitsey set up in Chiswick, and a wonderful photographic exhibition down there. This is what Tim and his team do. They create words, pictures, ideas, and so on. So they can't. You have to hold it a bit higher, Tim. So this is the sort of thing. So we want a record. We've got a photographic record. We've got a filmic record, but we'd like a sort of artistic record as well. Thank you, Tim. You looked marvellous. So they're visual minutes. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with. We are filming many of the sessions. We streamed yesterday's sessions with Yusafa and Gordon and Sarah, and there's all kinds of twittering going on. Sometimes it has the hashtag up, and sometimes it doesn't. The other thing is to say that the sessions that are being filmed will go online, and you'll be able to download them and so on. So we're very grateful to Bloomberg. I want to say this up front. Bloomberg have enabled us by sponsoring the festival to do a much greater online presence. And we really believe that, of course, WOW is important for you to turn up and be here, but it's very, very relevant to get WOW to other parts of the country and other parts of the world where people can't physically get here, or for various reasons, you just aren't able to be present on site. We have friends here from Australia. Anybody here from Australia yet? Yes, because we're looking at doing WOWs in Australia. Morning. We did WOW in Baltimore last year. We're doing a WOW in Derry, a city of culture, this year as well. And we're looking at set up some regional WOWs. Can I draw your attention over here to Jenny Draper and her colleague Ali Pottinger, who are going to be signing for us this morning. And I'm now going to introduce the first speaker in the Keys to the Castle. We asked 4 women who we just totally admire and who are leading other sessions during the day to give us a sort of bite-sized part of what they're thinking about at the moment. And we're starting with a space scientist, Maggie Aderin-Pocock. And I'm just going to give you a little taster about her. She's worked as a space scientist for the last 10 years. She's managed large projects, making a range of different satellites, as you do. She has a fellowship at UCL, enabling her to do more of the science communication work that she loves. She also does some of her own work through a small company that she began called Science Innovation Limited. And through this company, Maggie conducts tours of the universe, a scheme she set up to engage children and adults with the whole idea of the wonders of space. To date, she's presented to over 120,000 people around the world. And as well as public speaking, Maggie works as a TV presenter. So Maggie, welcome. Thank you.
There's a problem with introductions like that. It means you've got a lot to live up to. So here goes. So generally, I want to talk to you about the universe. But I also want to talk to you about science communication and engaging our girls. And I want to tell you why I think this is important and what I do to try and engage them. So as Jude said in her very flattering introduction, I have been working as a space scientist for over 10 years now. And probably about 5 years ago, I was trying to recruit people, and especially girls, into space science, and there was no one there. I couldn't understand it. Because as a scientist, I get to do great things. I get to make a real difference to people's lives. I get to travel the world. I get to see the universe. So why couldn't I recruit anyone? I couldn't understand it. So I thought, okay, well, something's got to be done about this. And so I decided I'll sort of go out and start trying to engage people. And so I want to tell you about sort of some of the techniques I use and some of the challenges we face trying to actually engage people. But let's first look at the statistics. If we look at sort of the balance between men and women in science, so STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths, there is some good news. If we look at the biological science, if we look at medicine, we're just about reaching balance. Now, this has taken many years to achieve, so I think this is sort of a positive thing. We have reached balance. But if we go on to sort of the physical sciences, things like physics, chemistry, that sort of thing, the story, we're not there yet. 30%, only 30% of females actually go on to do sort of STEM degrees. And then if we look at engineering, the picture is dire. only 10% of the qualified engineers in the country are women. And so this seems like a terrible dichotomy when something needs to be done. So I use 3 weapons in my role as a science communicator. I like to use role models wherever possible. Show people, because often when I go and speak to girls, they say, well, science and engineering isn't for us. That's boys' stuff. So it's showing them positive role models about things that people do. Next thing I like to try and do is show the relevance of science. I've spoken to the girls where they say, well, if you study a degree in physics, all you can do is become a physics teacher. No, it's just so wrong. And so what I try and do is show them some of the things that I've done through my career as a physicist, and just show a tiny snapshot of some of the jobs you can have, and then try and scale it up to the multiplicity of jobs that are out there. But I think my best weapon is wonder, because science is wonderful. Science infiltrates our lives, and so I try and show the wonder of science, and hopefully I can give you a sort of a sneak preview of that as well. So talking about role models, if you go to the average science class in the UK, they will have pictures of role models on the wall. And most of the time, there will be pictures of men, and I will describe them rather unflatteringly as pale, male, and stale. And these are the pictures that we have on the wall. And there's actually a video that I've seen of sort of, why girls don't study physics. And it's in the girls' classroom, and they've got all these sort of slightly serious-looking chaps on the wall. And they've also got Beaker from the Muppets. And so they've got these men and they've got Beaker, but they haven't got one woman on the wall. So they can get a Muppet on the wall, but they can't get a woman. So I reckon we need to get sort of more female role models out there. And then we've got quite a few to choose from. I have a picture here of, this was a Babylonian princess, and she became the chief astronomer in Babylon. But even if looking at the picture of here, you can see actually she's got a rather healthy growth here. And the reason she had to wear a beard was because when she was speaking to her male colleagues, to address them, she had to put on a false beard. Now, as an astronomer today, we don't have to do this anymore, so this is progress. Now, my next role model is Hypatia of Alexandria, an amazing woman from all accounts. She was brought up by her father to be a perfect physical being and a perfect mental being. And she had so much influence that unfortunately she got dashed to pieces by a mad mob. But, you can't have everything in science. So again, we are progressing. But to move on, we have some more modern-day role models. This is a picture of Marie Curie, one of only 4 people to win 2 Nobel Prizes. And she did that in an era when it was virtually unheard of women doing science. And also Jocelyn Bell Brunel, she spoke here last year, a fantastic role model. These are the pictures we need to be getting out into schools. But I would like to add a word of caution about role models. Because when I was growing up, I would go and they'd say, okay, this is a role model and this is a role model, and think, oh yeah, they're brilliant. But they're perfect and they're totally unlike me. The role models that we show sometimes just look like superwomen. I'm a role model, I have a baby, I juggle this, I juggle that, I do everything. And you think, well, okay, that's brilliant for you, but I just can't see myself in that role. I can't see myself doing that. So now when I go out to schools, I like to try and show that role models are everyday people. And that's the real point to get across. Everyone in this room is a role model. We all have something brilliant in our lives that we can share with others. And that's what we should be doing. We should be sharing the brilliant bits, but also showing that we're human as well. Because if we put our role models on a pedestal, they just look too high to attain. So we need to make our role models accessible. So when I go out to schools, I tell them what I'm really like, which is slightly dangerous. So I tell them, I'm often pathologically late. If my husband was here, he would tell people how truly untidy I am. I am a complete scatterbrain. And it's even worse now, because I have a 3-year-old daughter, so I'm looking after her, and then the pots are bubbling over here. So a total scatterbrain. But we need to make our role models real. We need to show the brilliant things we do, but we need to show ourselves as human. But the message really is, we are all role models. We need to get out there and spread the word. Show the people the brilliant things that you do and spread that around. So in terms of science engagement, it's quite challenging because the reaction that most people have to science is, ah! So when I say I'm a scientist, you can see their eyes glazing over and they stop stepping slowly backwards, especially at dinner parties. Nice weather we're having. So what I try and do is I try and do 3 things. I try and tell people why I became a scientist. I try and tell people how I became a scientist. But most importantly, I try and tell people what I do as a scientist. Because as that girl said, if you study physics, you can only become a physics teacher. She is so wrong. So let's show the diversity of jobs that are out there. So starting with the first question, why I became a scientist. It is the clangers. There's no getting around it. I've looked back and it is the clangers. Because as a child, I used to watch the clangers. And I watch them again now with my 3-year-old daughter. And the clangers were magical. I mean, the little furry creatures, and when they were sad, ooh. As a 2-year-old, that just touched my heart. And also, at the start of every episode, it's a different start, but at the start of every episode it says, this is planet Earth. Now let's travel through space to another planet where other creatures live. And so I thought, yes, I want to travel to other planets and see other creatures. And also, I was born in the late 1960s, at the time of the birth of the space era. So people were zooming away from Earth, traveling to the moon. So it seemed natural that I would one day visit the clangers. Now, that's become... I have sort of grown up a bit since then. I realise the clangers aren't out there. Well, I still like to dream, but anyway. But I still want to get out there, and that is my dream. And that's another message I like to try and give kids especially. It's the power of dreams. As a child growing up, I suffered from dyslexia. So the aspirations for me weren't very high. I was sort of shunted into a remedial class and given the safety scissors and the glitter. But because I had a dream of going to space, that has transcended those barriers. And so I think it is important to have dreams. So, in terms of the range and the diversity of science, the relevance of science, I've had a number of different jobs in my time. My dream was always to become a space scientist, or my dream is still to one day get out in space. But I've had a number of different jobs on the way. One of the first jobs I had was actually working for the MOD. Now, as a child, I decided I was a pacifist, so working for the MOD was quite challenging for me. But actually, when I actually got my degree and my PhD from Imperial College in London, when I actually came out, Dr. Maggie, ready to take on the world, there was a credit crunch, and there were no jobs around. And it was really quite heart-wrenching. I've studied for 7 years at university, and I can't find a job. So I got my first job with the MOD, and that was quite interesting because you sort of go for the interview and they say, okay, yes, we're going to take you on. I say, oh, great, well, thank you. What will I be doing? I say, well, we can't actually discuss that with you yet because you haven't signed the Official Secrets Act. But don't worry, we'll show you. I think, oh, my God, what are they going to make me do? So my first job was actually designing missile warning systems. Now, this sounds like an odd thing to do, but if you can imagine a pilot flying along, if a missile is launched at them, there's something they can do. They can let off a pyrotechnic, which is effectively a big, bright firework. And this will burn, and it will deflect the heat-seeking missile towards the firework rather than towards the aircraft. The problem is missiles get more and more sophisticated. And so what we need to do is we need to develop technology that understands what a missile looks like and can automatically set off a flare when a missile is detected. Now, the problem with missile warning systems or missile detectors is you need to know what a missile looks like. Now, to do this, what we did is we flew around in an old Andover aircraft, and we flew over a test track. So what they do is they'd put a missile with no warhead on a test track, and this missile would zoom down a track 1.5 kilometres long. And what we'd do is we'd fly above it, trying to get data. Now, to try and get data, what we used to do is we'd open up the back door of the aircraft. I don't know if you can see it in this picture. I've got a very large belt around my waist, which would be strapped to the floor of the aircraft, and I would be pointing a camera out of the open door of an aircraft. Now, I especially like to show kids this picture, because usually when they think of a scientist, they think of someone, in a lab with some test tubes or playing on a computer, and I did some of that. But we can also hang out the back doors of aircrafts, a bit more like James Bond. So science can be very diverse. But on the other hand, working for the MOD, I actually actively got a promotion and actively started working on landmine detection. Now, landmines are a devastating problem across the world. I mean, this is the United Nations statistics. It will take 1,000 years to clear the landmines we just have out there in the world today using current techniques. So something needs to be done. And this is a problem across the globe. See, landmines are just so easy to deploy. They're cheap to make, they're easy to deploy. You can throw them out of out of a helicopter. They land and they sit there. And they're a wonderful deterrent. While the landmines are there, people won't go to the affected areas. And the landmines are horrible because they're not designed to kill people. They're designed to maim. And I went out to Cambodia a few years ago and met some of the kids who had been affected. There's a landmine there called the green parrot, and that has caused lots of problems because it looks like a toy. Kids who don't know better pick it up, and the results are devastating. And so this is a global problem that's out there now, and sometimes it comes up into high profile and then it goes back down. So we need to do something about this, and I'm amazingly proud to have been part of a team trying to solve the problem. And so landmines also bring up another problem about science, or another complication of science, because there are scientists trying to make landmine detectors, trying to detect these devastating things. But there are also scientists who are making landmines. And science can be used for good or for effectively evil. And that's why we need to be scientifically aware, so we actually steer the direction that science is going. Now, my passion has always been space, and now what I do is I build instruments that go into space. So it really freaks me out, because I say, I'm a space scientist, and it still sort of slightly surprises me. I have achieved part of my dream. I haven't got into space, but I'm making things that go into space. And these instruments actually help us here on planet Earth again. It's that relevance. This is a satellite called Aeolus, and it's designed to measure wind speed through the Earth's atmosphere. And this is one of the key bits of data that we're missing in terms of understanding climate change, because it's the wind that links cells across the globe. And so understanding wind speeds in the atmosphere can help us get a better understanding of climate change. So all these different jobs help us as a people, help us as a globe. And so science can really make a difference. But also, we are living in exciting times. We are understanding the genome, and this is giving us new medicines, new understandings of our very DNA, our very blueprints of life. There is a wonderful branch of science called synthetic biology. Not many people have heard about it, and it sounds a bit scary, but what they are doing is that people are taking strands of DNA in the lab, combining them into cells, and creating life. The potential of what we can do with this is amazing. It seems scary, but what can we do with this? How can we utilize this? And in my area of astronomy, we're making amazing inroads into discovering what's out in the universe. For instance, we're detecting things called exoplanets. Now, we have the planets of the solar system going around our sun, but what we're doing now is we're detecting planets going around other stars. It's almost like expanding our search for life in the universe. And that's another point to make about science. Sometimes when I speak to kids, they feel that science is quite static. Science is done and dusted, we understand it, there's not much to do. I like to point out to them that currently we don't actually know what 96% of the universe is made of. We know what 4% of the universe is made of, but the other 96%, we're really not sure. So there's still a lot of work to do. And ideas about science and astronomy evolve. 400 years ago, we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. I am Earth. Everything revolves around me. And it made sense. The sun rises, the sun sets. It all seemed to revolve around us. But ideas progress. People like Copernicus came up and said, no, that's not right. It looks like the sun is the center of the universe, and everything revolves around the sun. And then with bigger and better technology, the sort of instruments that we're making, telescopes, bigger and better telescopes, we now realize that that's not true either. We live in a galaxy called the Milky Way. In the Milky Way, there are 200 billion stars. Each one of those stars we see in the night sky is a sun like our sun. So each one of those stars has planets going around it. So with 200 billion stars, and let's say on average 3 planets going around each one of those stars, how many planets are just in our galaxy? And then if you start saying, do you think there's life in our galaxy? I'd say yes, undoubtedly. It's a numbers game. 200 billion stars, each one of those stars, a few planets. Why would life just occur here? But then we can look even further into space. This is an image called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. And it was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope a number of years ago. And what Hubble did is it looked at what we thought was a piece of empty space and stared at it for 6 whole days to get a really long exposure. And when you get a long exposure, faint objects that you can't usually see, suddenly you become aware of them. And when we started looking at the data we were getting, we realized that what we thought was empty space wasn't empty at all. It had a wide number of galaxies. So when we took that piece of empty space and scaled it up 360 degrees, scaled it up to a sphere, we tried to work out how many galaxies are in the universe. And we came up with a pretty mind-boggling number. Current estimates of the number of galaxies in the universe stand at approximately 100 billion galaxies. Now, I like to try and think of these numbers late at night because it just boggles my mind. And it's better than counting sheep, I promise. But at the same time, sometimes I tell people this, and they say, well, it makes me so small and insignificant. It makes our problems look sort of trivial. But I don't think so. To me, it makes me feel part of something truly amazing. We are part of an amazing universe, and I think it's a joy to be part of that universe. But bringing things back down to earth, science is important to all of us. Science is important to women because science is a game changer. Through various inventions over the years, our lives as women have changed. I mean, things like contraceptive pills, they have enabled us, they have freed us. Tampons, it's quite mundane, but they have given us more ability. The refrigerator, women don't have to go shopping every day. We can bung things in the fridge and the freezer. It gives us more freedom. And this is a bit of an odd one, but plumbing is a joy that we have. It's a joy that we don't appreciate. But if you look at it, there are women across the world who are spending significant amounts of their time gathering water every day. So in just one day, 200 million work hours are consumed by women gathering water. Now, to put that into perspective, that is the equivalent of building 28 Empire State Buildings every day. Now, these hours could be spent in education, in learning, in doing other things, just for the want of proper plumbing. And that's not even to talk about sanitation. So engineering, science makes a difference to women's lives. And so we need to have an awareness of it. So we need more women in science. And through the talks, Jude very kindly said, I've seen approximately 120,000 kids over the last 5 years. And every so often, a girl will come up to me and say, thank you, Maggie. Because of your talk, I'm going to become an engineer or I'm going to become a scientist. And to me, that just makes my year. I think, yes, we've got one. But that's not the end of the story. We need more scientists and engineers, and we have some brilliant scientists and engineers coming up, but there's more to it than that. Just to mention a few of our brilliant inventors, our brilliant young inventors. This is a girl called Emily Cummings, and she, every year, actually it's next week, I sit on the Big Bang Fair, and I sit on the Young Engineer of the Year award. And various girls come through here, and it's really heartening to see. And Emily Cummings came up with an idea of a solar-powered refrigerator. So it's an eco-refrigerator made out of bits and bobs you can find around, and it is a refrigerator that could be built in the third world. I was mentioning refrigerators as liberating us. This can liberate women of the third world. And this is another girl, Jessica Jones. She was last year's winner, and we were totally blown away by what she was doing. She got into sort of electrical engineering when she was about 4 years old, and she's been doing things since then. And the idea that she came up with was a fetal monitor, which is actually powered by fibre optics. So it's very low powered. So it can be used, again, in the third world by women who go into labour. Because many of the miscarriages and many of the death in childbirth that occur is because they don't quite know what's happening. So if you can have a fetal monitor that can be powered by 2 AA batteries, these has the potential to save lives. And this is one of the things that I see when I do the Science of the Young Scientists of the Year competition. The blokes come up, and a number of young men come through, and they're coming up with ideas, and they come up with an idea, and they're just looking of somewhere to apply it. But what the girls do is they think of a problem, and then they try and solve it. And I think it shows the difference in the mindset of girls and boys, especially at this age. And this is what we need to be utilising. We need to be employing the diversity between men and women. Most engineering companies that employ men and women in sort of a more balanced numbers do much better because they have a much wider range of experience to utilise. So why should we leave out 50% of our workforce? So my final message to you is science is for everybody. Although I cheer every time I get a new scientist and engineer joining us, the real message is that science is for all of us. We all need to be aware of what's happening in science and engineering. Because at the moment, we have a total male bias in science. We're getting science and engineering done by men, and science policy and science and engineering policy being made by men. And science is just far too important to us as women to leave it in the hands of the men. So what I want to say is, as women, we need to become informed and take control of the sciences of the future, because those sciences could dictate all our futures. And on a final message, this is my daughter. And what I want us to do is I want us to encourage all our children, especially our girls, to aim high. Because in aiming high, we actually achieve far more than we could ever thought possible and can really, truly reach our potential. Thank you very much.
Ruby, we all know that she's a performer and a writer, and we've seen her over many years being absolutely fantastic. She's also a mental health campaigner, and I think this is a key aspect of us inviting her for. You have to have courage to be a stand-up, but you have to have the courage as well to say that's not just the funny side of my life. There are other bits going on too. We've been enormously stunned, really, and kind of strengthened by Ruby's mental health campaigns in the last few years. She arrived in Britain from the United States in '77 and trained as an actress and began her career with the Royal Shakespeare Company before developing her own brand of Attitude TV. And she's contributed to and written and edited numerous scripts, including Absolutely Fabulous, and creating some of TV's most memorable moments. And after 3 decades working on stage TV and radio, she's changed direction, completing both a psychotherapy diploma and an MST in mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy from Oxford University, and she now provides workshops to corporate leaders, making them think about communication with their clients and colleagues. Having suffered from depression from an early age, she was recently inspired to establish Black Dog Tribe, a social network providing information about and social support for mental health issues. She recently completed an international tour and West End run with her one-woman show, Out of Her Mind, and her new book comes out in June, because she told me she just finished writing it yesterday. So, Ruby Wax.
Thank you. Hi. You know, Jude, that's the cruelest thing, is to make me go on after Maggie, because I got nothing to say. Nothing. How can you do that to me? That's everything you need to know, and now here's someone who worked on television. Anyway, a little shallow. So the word envy, I'm sure that she does to me. First of all, it was such a good atmosphere back there, because if it was a male, she would have shot her testosterone out at me saying, look what I know. You know, put her organ on the table instead. You really like her? How do you like a scientist who knows that much? So only a female could do that. So anyway, but I'm not talking about envy, though I could go on for hours. Because I always think if you ever hear me say, oh, I'm really happy you got the job I always wanted, believe me, I want you dead. But really in an agonizing way. So I'm really talking about reinvention, because I think that really is the most important thing for us to learn. But because actually, we were supposed to be dead by the time we were 30. It's not long that we've lived this long. So we have to keep inventing what we do, you know, chapter after chapter, just goes on and on and on. So I guess I'm a poster child for reinvention, because sadly, I'm not going to stand up and go, it's not fair, you know, when we're spewed out of a job. It just happens, you know. So my whole life has actually been reinvention. I guess I got it from my ancestors, because we were always immigrating. You know, we never felt at home. You know, we always scuttled around borders with our little short legs, you know, running from border to border with pianos on our backs. So I'm used to moving quickly. So even in my early life, because I came from a dysfunctional home, I make a joke of it because, you know, why bore people with the real details? But usually when I talk about my mother, I mention that she used to follow me around the house on all fours with 2 sponges in her hands and then 2 tied to her knees. She was completely absorbent. And she used to follow me around, and then she'd go with this accent, who brings footprints into a building? That was how she spoke. So they're Austrian. Do you know that race? Violent. If you order something off the menu, they think you're declaring war on Europe. Ich habe das Schwein geschossen, heruntergelassen, gehackt, der Koch. People come out of the kitchen with their hands up. So anyway, I left America. They escaped from Austria. I escaped back in again. We could have maybe gotten a special deal on a ticket. But anyway, I came here, and I had no talent at all, but I decided to really rebel, and I decided I'll be an actress, because I wasn't going anywhere career-wise, and I was getting Ds. Anybody take SATs here? Right. I got a 475. You know how low that is. That's the level of a houseplant as far as my intellect. So I thought, I wasn't even good looking, I had no talent. I thought I'll become an actress just to fuck with my parents. So I had absolutely no talent, but I had the drive of a Rottweiler. So I came to here. They wouldn't let me into a drama school in London, so I went to Glasgow. Nobody wanted to go. And I did tongue exercises for 3 years. Ta 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 la la la. So that's how I got the English accent I have today. Thank you. Thank you. That paid up. So then, strangely, I got into the Royal Shakespeare Company because Trevor Nunn really liked what I could do with my tongue. And we have to do what we have to do. So I did that for a few years. And then I decided I would write my own show. And Alan Rickman, luckily, was in the show, and I know how to use people. So he directed my first one-woman show, and he's done that ever since, except for the last one. But then I got a job on TV using French and Saunders. Far more talented than I am, but if you grab onto their ankles, they can drag you to success. So they got me there. And then I started doing really interesting documentaries, fantastic, you know, where I'd meet the Ku Klux Klan, and they made me a wizard, you know, first Jew. And kind of people in Alabama who threw snakes at each other to prove their love for God. Hillbillies, it was unbelievable, playing bluegrass. And, you know, they throw full boas at each other during the church service, and then a few of them were missing fingers. I guess that God didn't really like them that much. But they let me do fascinating stuff, and then eventually they made me do celebrity, which every girl wants these days. I mean, you know, this is a job of the century. I'm sure even the space scientists could agree with that one. So, of course, you take it, and I thought I was just doing it for a few years, but it went on and on and on, and so because that was the culture we were developing into, like these people would be more interesting than space. And, of course, I took it, and it's lucrative. But then there comes a time where, actually, I always knew when to leave the party before I'm the last one. I don't know if I left or they kicked me out. You know, there was a moment where I was auditioning for my own part. And of course, you do turn into a persona because, you know, that's what it's a great job, but eventually you start to believe in your own myth. You go in a room and go, actually, you're swollen with narcissism. That's the disease. And when that starts to fade, it's like being addicted to junk. You know, you start to say, oh, I'll do anything, anything. You want me to eat my mother-in-law, toss her on a barbecue. Desperate. So anyway, I decided to leave show business, and they decided for me to leave also. So I thought, okay, well, I got to do something here. So I was always interested in psychology. I went to Regents to get a degree in psychotherapy, and just forgot about everything I'd done before. And it's interesting, please don't think I'm being cruel, but for a lot of women who are going through menopause and realize that men will never hit on them again, they decide to be psychotherapists. that is how to recognize them. You know, you pretend that you really care about people, but, you know, no, you do. I'm being facetious, but I do know a lot of women at my point in life who decided to do that. Anyway, I studied for 3 years because, of course, one week I loved Jung, the next week I loved, you know, Melanie Klein, the next week I loved them. And I tried to be a therapist. I did 200 hours. I did, and I admire so much they're angels that can sit there and absorb somebody else's pain. But I thought, really, I'm much more practical than that in my own mind. So I thought, I'm going to study neuroscience because I have depression, and I really want to figure out how I can handle my own machine. You know, like if you're stuck on the motorway and you break down, I wanted to know what really goes on in the engine so that I don't have to run to shrinks for the rest of my life. You know, I've emptied my bank account for these guys. You know, I used to leave them and I'd go, I know exactly who I am, and then I'd get to the tube station and forget again. So I'd have to go back. So I thought, I'm going to learn how this machine works. So I crashed a course at UCL. And they were all 21 years old. I told them I had a skin disease. That's why I looked so old. And they believed me. Anyway, and they let me go out with them for lunch, mostly because I had the car. But anyway, Then they all left. They went to Yale, and obviously I didn't go because I didn't know anything. But I thought I got to trump that card because, again, the Rottweiler came up. So at that point, I was really quite ill. I don't know if that's because I jumped to another chapter. I always had depression. You know, this isn't something that happens because something terrible happens. You know, I've had it since I was a kid, but as a kid, they don't have a name for it. And in my mother's time, they just said she was going through a change of life. Yeah, for the last 87 years. So at my time, it was like waking hibernation. I would just take to my bed. So who knew what this was? But then it really started to crash, because if you don't acknowledge it, it takes over like a tsunami, because there's no name for it. You don't know where to get any help. Just before I went to Oxford, which was a miracle, I had a total breakdown, and that really encouraged me to figure out how the brain works. I thought, okay, I have to reinvent something, have a reason to live, and to figure out how to fix myself. So I did a mindfulness course. I met Mark Williams, who was one of the founders. He said if I wanted to really study, I'd have to get into Oxford. And so I didn't tell him about my SAT scores. I kept that quiet. And then I did find some old grades that I had, but I do a fantastic interview. So I was suddenly in a class with 14 doctors who looked at me like I was a third encounter. But fuck 'em, I was there. So I graduated. I haven't done my, the full bat wing thing with the square hat yet. That's in September. But in the meantime, this poster girl for mental illness started, and I never would have told anybody I had it, not even my friends, because A, you'll find yourself out of a job, and B, come on, I'm not starving. I'm not living in a township. I'm not being carpet bombed. So the shame on top of it really contributes. But the only reason I came out was that Comic Relief 4 years ago took a photo of me because they were giving money to mental illness charities. And I thought, because my celebrity was in the toilet, that it would be postcard size, because that's how you know how famous you are, by how much time they give you on Comic Relief and send you to an African country to cry. Sorry, don't. It's a wonderful cause. It is. But sorry, I can only speak the truth. It's my curse. And the girls like Bedelia and Finola come with you and go, it'd be so lovely if you could cry. And put a red nose on the child with malaria. I'm never going to work for them again. Never. Anyway, so give a lot. It's this week. And maybe I'll be back on TV. So anyway, Comic Relief I thought it was going to be small, but when I went in the tube, there was a gigantic poster of me in the tube saying, this woman has mental illness, please help her. And so I was mortified, and I hurled myself on it, but then I went down the escalator, and there was another one, so I kept hurling all the way down, just mortified. So I thought, here's one. Only my parents' daughter could think of this. I'm going to write a show and make that look like my publicity poster. So that's what I did. And I wrote a show out of her mind. It was called Losing It. Then I was with another woman who was fantastic. But one woman show eventually came out. We toured mental asylums. I did Bedlam. Not many people can put that on their CV. And I did mental institutions. Was the happiest, most wonderful, most fulfilling job I ever had, because I finally met my people. And they could tell I wasn't talking down to them because we could see each other's eyes. So finally, it was a little bit of narcissism because I got the microphone, but I let them talk to me, and that was the food. That's the audience you really want. And boy, I would do that for the rest of my life. And I will, because I'm touring Australia and LA and New York. And part of the gig is that the audience get to come in free once a week, not the audience, the public. And then I'll have like staffs, SANE provided it last time, so people have somewhere to go and talk to somebody, and also give them neuroscientists so they know how it works, because the public don't get a lot of information. Books about star signs, millions of them, and self-help. But how the real brain works, which is a book I wrote yesterday, but thank you. But like bite-sized and funny. Okay, so I went inside where there's actually 100 billion neurons in here, so why even look into space? Figure this one out first. Yeah. And that's the way we'll learn to self-regulate. Once there's no more money for shrinks, no more money for drugs, no more money, this next zeitgeist will be about bringing down the cortisol, and there's certain things you can do. And by the way, it's not just feeling positive and opening your legs and smiling. It's a little more like you can't do one sit-up and have a six-pack. But I'm not talking about that today. So anyway, I guess that's reinvention. And I guess where I'm going is it's getting ready for when there's got to be real reinvention, when you really start to change, because it will happen. And so I guess that wisdom, but I don't have any, I never had anybody older to ask, you know. First of all, where am I going to find somebody older on television? They put them on morning talk shows sometimes. You see them down there, oh, they're so brave. Going, oh, we love it. We're having so much more time to collect homeless cats. So I don't, you know, where are these shamans? My grandmother couldn't even find her teeth, you know. But so I guess wisdom is about when you let go of the envy and the narcissism and the, you know, the bitterness. I guess when you let that go and you can finally say, I guess, the world will be okay without me, then you're wise. So that's what I'm aiming for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ahdaf Soueif, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Follow that and the one before, and without the little warm-up now, because I've already done that. Great. So, the 18 days. Right. Okay. So, during those first 18 days, and for a little while after, we were really resistant to being asked about specifically women in the revolution. Now, you can imagine that the Western media, that was really what they wanted to know. They wanted to know where were the Islamists, and they wanted to know what about women, and how is this revolution affecting women, and so on. And our line was, and it was completely true, was that this revolution is about citizenship, and that we were not interested in anything that could work as being divisive. And eventually, some 10 feminist women's NGOs put out a statement saying precisely this, saying that women were taking part in this revolution as citizens, not on gender issues, and that our aim was to create a society, everybody's aim was to create a society that did not discriminate against anybody on the basis of anything. Women had, they were obviously there in the revolution, and they had also been very present in all the associations and the actions that, with hindsight, we see led to the revolution. And so NGOs, associations set up to help victims of torture, associations set up to provide legal aid to people who were detained, things like the Popular Committee for the Support of the Palestinian Intifada. Across the spectrum, women were active and were heading some of these campaigns and institutions and so on, and that continued into the revolution. However, with what happened after, as you know, on the 11th of February, Mubarak did step down, and the revolution was unable, because it was so horizontal, grassroots, young, inexperienced, etc., was unable to put forward a body that could say, we are now in charge of the country, and have the street behind it. And therefore, the military stepped up and said, we will now look after the country, and we will oversee the peaceful transition of this country to democracy, and we will safeguard the revolution. And they started killing people, more or less. But so this is Mahi Noor al-Masri, and the last one was, again, someone else. These are just images of women within the revolution. You can see all the soldiers in front of Mahi Noor. She's an Alexandria activist. Now, just technically here, what I've got here in front of me is the same as you've got there, which means that I don't have the little icons on the left, which means that I don't know what's coming up next, because my head's gone. So we'll try and work with that as well. So here we go. Okay. So with the military taking over, people were detained, thousands of people, young men, were subjected to court-martial. And then on the 8th or 9th of May, something happened. The people who were detained that day, among them, there was a number of young women. And because the police were sort of non-existent, thank God, but the military, when it detained people, it took them to military detention places. And the women were taken to a military detention center, and they were given virginity tests, which, again, you might have heard of. Yeah. Now, eventually, when this was challenged and when the military had to explain what they were doing, they said that basically obviously because society puts such a premium on virginity, they needed to, it was like sort of determining as you were going into this detention center what your valuables were. So they didn't want anybody coming out saying, oh, I was raped in jail. That was the excuse. But of course, it was a form of sexual abuse as a tool, as a political tool to scare people, to deter women from being active on the streets, to encourage society and families to try to stop women taking part in protests on the street and so on. We all know how difficult it is to report or talk about sexual abuse and humiliation and rape. But what happened on this occasion was that this young woman, whose image you see at the very top there, Samira Ibrahim, she took the military to court. She took the military to court, and she was supported by her family, which was a very conservative family. They were right there with her. And it went to the High Constitutional Court, and the process was ruled illegal. Therefore, the military were prevented from ever doing this again. But also, she created this action of hers with the support of her family. Meant that she created a change in the way people responded to this kind of incident. So, because she would not sort of internalize what had happened and just be ashamed of it and sit in a corner, she took it out there. Society responded to that. And when she went to speak, even at provincial universities, she was given a hero's welcome. And the graffiti that represented her in the streets, you can see what the army was also saying was they were saying that this was a legitimate process, but that it was carried out in the wrong way by that particular army doctor. And so obviously this is always what the authorities say. They say this is an aberration. Our system is fine, but these are individual aberrations. So this is what the graffiti is commenting on, that the whole battalion there is that particular male doctor who conducted this investigation, and eventually also they had his name and his phone number up on the walls. So the process, that shaming process, was turned around. The next thing here is this image, which is the confrontations with the army continued, and people became more and more aware of what was going on, because it was really difficult for the people at large to believe that the army was actually working against the revolution and that the army was actually killing people on the street and subjecting young men to court-martials and so on. People needed to believe that their army was a good thing. This was the one remaining kind of institution of state that existed, and it was armed, and it was on the street. And also, it's an army that has, like most families will have somebody in the army. So it was a difficult thing for people to accept. So anyway, various confrontations, and then there was a particularly big one. It was a key moment in a street called Muhammad Mahmoud, just off Tahrir, in November 2011. And there, the army shot specifically at people's eyes. And many people lost eyes. This is a mural, of course, showing that. And also, in a kind of a wave that came straight after that, in December 2011, which was the Cabinet Street sit-in, the army went in to break up that sit-in, and for the first time, there was actual brutality towards women on the street. In 2005, during Mubarak's time, the regime had used brutality towards women on the street during elections because people were out protesting at the rigging of elections. And that was the first time that we saw, I mean, we'd always had beatings of people, particularly men, but this was the first time that there was beatings and they would rip a shirt off a woman, for example, and so on. In December 2011, the army started doing the same thing that the regime that we had removed was doing. And here are some images of some activists and what was happening with them. There's an old lady who was there. Now here, this was an image to show, because the army pretended that there was a building was burned down, the Egyptian Academy of Science was burned down, and of course they were accusing the revolution of having burned it down. So here, this was an attempt to show that this same soldier who had been brutalizing, and then this is the young doctor, Farida Al-Hos, and here you can see the two women, and also this one, you see where the mark is. There, she's a woman in a veil, she's in a full niqab, so she's just like, she's this little black thing down there in the middle of the circle with the soldiers on top of her. And then of course, and this, now here they really overstepped the mark, because this lady, Khadija, she was one of the mothers of the revolution from the very beginning. She's quite a posh lady whose children have grown up and they're living abroad, and she made it her job to bring sandwiches down to the street, and she became one of the mothers, the nourishers of the revolution. So when they beat her up, now this is the two young men who rescued her, they overstepped an important mark. And then here, of course, is the image that you all know. And so this was a kind of escalation that took place over 3 days in confrontations between the military and civilians, with women suddenly being beaten up on the street, which was, for us, was completely unbelievable. And something always happens, we find, which is that things escalate and they reach a point, and then when they reach that point, there's societal movement, and sometimes there is a representation in a kind of artistic form that flowers out of that. Here, the image of this young woman was anonymous and insisted on remaining anonymous, which was brilliant, because then she became an icon. Nothing could get bogged down in who she was or why she was there or what she was like or nothing. And so she became an icon. The revolution gave her the name of Sitt al-Banat, which is something out of folklore, like Snow White, for example. And so, and you see the solution of the artist here, because her features were not known and nobody wanted them known, and so she's given the gas mask, because of course one of the things that came in very strongly at that point was the gassing, our gassing, as it were, with the tear gas constantly. And so she's there with the gas mask, and she appears everywhere. Every one of these graffiti, once it appears, it then gets replicated across the country. And then there's her blue bra. And that becomes a really powerful icon of the revolution. Remember that she was wearing a blue bra when she's dragged on the street. And the blue bra then starts appearing everywhere. And then somebody else adds to it that thing at the top, which is a kind of artistic rendering of the word no. And what it says is, it says no to the stripping of the people. And then the little calligraphy at the very bottom says, long live the revolution. And that then spreads everywhere. And gives birth to other images. So here, this bodice, for example, at the top it says the revolution continues, and then that line says a costume for women protesters. And lots of sort of, comic proposed costumes start appearing, and it becomes a sort of fashion thing. Now, another thing that starts happening, because there was a lot of talk, like, why did her abaya open so easily? What was she doing in the street? And of course, the Brotherhood was sort of coming into power, and so there was talk about who's veiled and who's not veiled, and so on. And so this graffiti started appearing, which you can see. There's a woman in full veil, there's a woman in hijab, and there's a woman with her hair showing, and the legend says, "Don't classify me." And that came up everywhere. And here's another one which says, "We are all human." And so here, what happened, what was provoked, was these statements. which are to do with being women. Now, remember what I was saying, that we were resisting bringing the gender aspect forward, but in fact were forced to do so by the actions of the regime, the military in this case. Also, what then happened was, well, two things. One was that that these images, the images of the women and of the women being beaten and so on, were picked up by young people. There's a group, a collectivist filmmakers group, who produced lots of short documentary, very short, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute of what was happening. And they put them out. They put them out always as cultural commons in various resolutions so that people can pick them up and use them. And actually in January, the January just after this, they were the most widely watched non-profit making YouTube channel in the world. So they were putting out this stuff, and what happened was young activists across the country were picking it up and showing it under a campaign called They Lie, Kazibun. That campaign and those images, which were also picked up by private TV channels, were what actually persuaded people that the military was not acting for the revolution. This was the campaign that turned the people against having a military presence on the street and the military being responsible for the revolution. So it was tremendously important in that way. And remember, we had had images. I mean, this young woman with the blue bra, she was actually with a young male journalist, and he was dragged away. And we've got pictures of, I mean, we've got a picture of a soldier pushing his, stamping on her with one foot. Well, we've got images of soldiers jumping up and down on his chest. But they don't make the same impact, yeah, because of the gender issue. And so because of what they did to women, it was more possible, it was quicker to discredit them. And also, in the public discourse of the politicians who were with the revolution or presenting themselves as with the revolution, everybody became gender sensitive. And so, for example, people would talk, rather than the man on the street when they were saying who the revolution was for, rather than talking about what the man on the street wants or thinks, they would say the woman who's trying to make ends meet, for example. Yeah? Talking to her and him, people who were, I mean, the whole gender issue sort of moved very naturally, actually, center space, because of what, what they did. And here, there, you see. Now, this says the intifada of the woman in the Arab world. And there, of course, that's a map of the Arab world. And this, again, was a very popular graffiti. And women there started to be specific women's protests. The mothers' protests, the women in support of, and in here you can see the women activists actually sort of confronting. And there was an enormous, enormous women's march, where over 3,000 women marched through downtown, and they gave a very open challenge as women to both the military and the Brotherhood. Now, the Brotherhood by then had committed its first very serious mistake in that in the events of Muhammad Mahmoud, when the army went down and started killing people, the one I showed you with the eyes, and then the one after that with all the young women, the Brotherhood pulled its men out of the revolutionary because they were trying to do a deal with the military because of the upcoming elections. And so, instead of being comrades on the street and comrades sort of confronting the police or whatever the power was, the non-Brotherhood found themselves without the Brotherhood, who are extremely organized and quite strong. And so that really was the first major mistake. And so, in this women's march, the chants were where's the military? The women are here. Bring out the field marshal, the women are here. Where's the Brotherhood? The women are here. The revolution has been stolen, the women will bring it back. So these were very self-identifying as women, taking on really all the powers that were there. You see there's a little like a moat around them there, around us there. And that actually was the men desperately trying to be part of this. And so we were these 3,000 women or so. And the men formed a cordon around us to protect us. Now, obviously, we didn't really need the protection of one line of men around us, but that was fine. They were trying to, to be good. I'm going to sort of romp through the rest, really, because of time. I want to mention a group of women that's very, very important, and that is the mothers of the martyrs. We now have in the region of 1,600 people who have been killed since the beginning of the revolution. And remember that these are not people who went out fighting. These are people who went out, who continue to go out in peace to change things. And they have been killed. Now, their mothers are, obviously, there is tremendous suffering. But they have also, you can't see this one, they've become a huge resource. Many of them, just 3 days ago, the mother of Muhammad al-Shafi'i, whom they killed, they shot him in the head in the middle of town on the 29th of January and hid his body for 30 days while she was going around looking for it. And eventually they released it to her from a morgue. And within hours, her discourse was, I have lost my son and I have gained 1 million sons. And that what matters now is you have to bring the revolution home. These people who have died, the only way that their families can find a way to live, really, is for them to be part of a story that is victorious in the end. And many of these women have adopted the revolution and have adopted the young men of the revolution. And also there's the art that comes of these women and celebrates them. These are gigantic murals in town celebrating these women. Finally, the issue of harassment, because that's really come up, and I just want to cover that very quickly. The issue of group harassment that has been happening recently. The women who have been at the receiving end of this have gone to court and they have testified. Again, this is a change, a big change, and they have testified that they believe that the groups that were harassing them were not only trained but had rehearsed. So that this is definitely, it is a rehearsed attempt to scare people and get them off the streets. Lots of graffiti, lots of art, lots of discourse, and also groups of young people, men and women, who have formed themselves into battalions to go down and protect the women from this kind of thing. So this says no to harassment. This says don't touch. This says if he calls you his mare, kick him. This says get angry. And this says my anger is bad. Like, watch out for my anger. And here there's a woman actually taking the law into her own hands. Now, this guy had whispered something to her about covering up, and she simply takes off her slipper and hits him with the support of the street. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to end on 2 images. One is, so we've had the women as the litmus test, and the women are as movers. Oh, one thing, this harassment thing and rape thing, when 21 women came forward recently to say that they had been harassed and they had been abused and they had been raped, and to take people to court, again, continuing the Samira Ibrahim line of refusing to be shamed, what happened actually was that a group of young male activists came forward and lodged a case against having been raped in detention as well. And that is much more difficult to talk about, and it is more difficult for men to admit that they have been raped and to try and take this forward. And they were able to do this because the women came forward and did it. So again, you see the gender thing. It's really interesting how it actually, you support each other. And so anyway, so there's that empowering thing. There's that sort of breeding sensitivity. And there is the inspiration and the nourishment. And on the inspiration and nourishment ticket, I'm going to end. 4 days ago, you know that in Egypt now there are about 7 cities that are up in arms. The police and the army are in there tear gassing people and killing them every day. There's civil disobedience. One of these cities is Mansoura. And last week, this young couple who were getting married in Mansoura decided to get married on the street in the middle of the protests and in the middle of the tear gas. You can see she's wearing a gas mask as they're out there surrounded by their friends and dancing. This is the traditional picture where normally you have a glass of juice, a glass of sweet something, and here they're holding the gas canister instead. Here, he's taken off the gas mask to kiss her hand, and here, this is something that we have not seen on the streets of Egypt for about 40 years, people kissing in public. So not only did they come out in the tear gas and with the gas canister, but they broke this thing as well, and everybody was singing and dancing around them, and in the tweets, it's not just the gas, we've kissed in the street. And the last image I want to leave you with is an amazing image from that great mural on Muhammad Mahmoud where I showed you the mothers of the Shuhada. And this was from a great mural that drew on various traditions of Egyptian art, and it represents the women of the Egyptian revolution. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Kissing on the street. All of those who are gay and lesbian here who kiss on the street now all the time, I hope. And those of us, could you imagine not being able to kiss on the street now? Wouldn't that be absolutely terrible? Angelique Kidjo gave the most magnificent concert last night, and some of you were at it. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. So, I mean, the stamina to then turn up in the morning, and it's just typical of Angelique. I'm just going to say that she is, under Time magazine, called her Africa's Premier Diva, and the BBC has included her in its list of the continent's 50 most iconic figures, and Guardian has listed her as the top 100 most inspiring women in the world. We don't know what all these figures really mean, but we're all in this, you know, we're all marvelous. Anyway, she's from Benin, the West African state of Benin, and she's really a tireless campaigner for women's health and education in Africa, a UNICEF peace ambassador, a prolific songwriter. She has 11 international albums to her name. And her campaign for UNICEF, United Nations Children's Fund, as well as her own organization, the Patonga Foundation, provides African girls with an education. And this has really been a way of demonstrating that the use of celebrity for absolutely fundamental causes of change, like Ruby was saying with mental health, this is one of the key ways that we can celebrate when women have power and use it well. Angelique Kidjo.
Sit in my bag too.
Okay, I will. Do you want this? Right,
yeah, I will. Give you all that.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
that. Okay.
Whoa. Stepping on after all those women is like, whoo, hoo, hoo. Singing I can do, but this one is a tough one. Well, one thing I have to say after my sister that spoke on the Egypt issue is that we women, we have more power than we think of. And it's about time that we unleash that power when something is not right. We have to prevent unnecessary death of people that are fighting for justice. Complacency is killing the world, and we've been complacent for too long on many issues. Let's use the power. I will start by talking about my childhood, why I become the person that I am today, the artist that I am, and the activist that I am. I was born in a family of 10 children, 7 brothers and 3 girls. I was the last little girl. And when I was growing up in Benin, I never could sense the importance of the stress my parents have to go through every school year. Family members will come in and telling my mom, you have no say in what we decide on your kid's future, because the father always have the say. And they will go thinking that they have rest their case, they go to my father and said, okay, Frank, this is the deal. We find 3 men ready to pay to marry your girls. And my father said, do I ask you what you do with yours? What is your business is mine? My children are not merchandise. They are human beings. I'm just a father. I don't own them. I want them to have a future. I want them to go to school, to choose their partner, to make their own mistake, and to hold themselves accountable. And the answer was, you talking like white people. And my father said, I can be red too. I can be blue too. I can be green too. But nobody comes to this house and tell me what I gotta do. So therefore, get out. But every year, it will come back. Me, I was a little girl, I was running around like crazy. Me, I was the tornado in the house. And I was the journalist. Everything happened, boom, I'm out there, whoa, coming back. And my mom was like, you're a girl. I'm like, no, when I grow up, I want to be James Brown. And my mom like, you cannot be James Brown. I'm like, why not? I can be James Brown. She said, all right. And I grew up and I realized I cannot be James Brown. Because when you're a kid, you're like, hey, the boys are doing it, I can do it. My brothers, they climb a tree, I go. They play boxing, I do boxing. They do soccer, I'm playing soccer. And my mom is like, come on, look at your feet. I'm like, what? I'm a boy. She's like, no, you're a boy. But most importantly, I grew up in a household where I'm realizing now that it was really not the rule. My mom and dad have decided that the house was going to be an open forum for every subject, for every human being that have something to say, at the exceptions of racism, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism. Those subjects were banned from the beginning. And I started singing at the age of 6 because my mom put together the first theater group that ever existed in West Africa. And she trained actresses and actors. And she had a business of fabric. And all the money, instead of investing the money in the business, she would invest in the theater. So after 3 years, the business collapsed and the theater collapsed because the government don't support arts at all. And as a little girl, I'll be going all the time to the rehearsal. They would come home and I'll learn every part, the talking, the singing, everything. I was just like, my nickname in my family is when, why, and how. I never get enough answer. I drive everybody nuts. But I always say, if I don't ask, I don't know. As my father said, you have something to say, you don't say it, I'm not God, I can't know it. And she put me on stage at the age of 6. And I've traveled a little bit with my mother. And the same thing will happen. People will come home and tell my father, what are you trying to do? Sending your wife out there with all those men and traveling all around the world doing theater? My father said to them, love is not a jail. If you love somebody, set the person free. If my wife is happy doing theater, I'm the most happiest man on the planet. I'm like, I like that. I even wrote a song on that quote. Because when you grow up, you realize that you have been given a lot of stuff that you take for granted. And then I continued singing because my brother decided to have a musical band, a cover band. So my father would come and grab me midnight. I sing 2 songs. It was in clubs where they sell alcohol, so I was not allowed to go there. So we have a deal with the club owner. They would smuggle me through the kitchen. I would sing my song, walk away, and go back to sleep. And when I become a teenager, I'm like, Dad, I'm making money singing. What's the point of going to school? He looked at me and go, this is the deal. You don't go to school, you don't sing. And if you insisted of leaving school, you find a place to live by yourself and you pay for yourself. I'm like, oh, okay. I got the message. And then he said, it's just for your own good. Imagine you cannot have a career singing. You have to have a job. But even if you end up being a singer, how are you going to be able to sing and talk about where you come from, what you do, and how the world play a part in what you do? And from that moment on, I realized that education is really an important thing. And on the other side, my mom, as an educated mother, was a freak of health. How many vaccinations I've had, I can't even count. Every time the UNICEF truck will come in, I will hide. I will dodge, man. I hate needles. And she knows every place I hide. She will come and grab me. I'm like, Mom, I don't need this vaccination. Everybody make fun out of us in school. She said, I don't care. If you're in good health, you learn better. Hygiene, sanitation, my mom was like, you wake up in the morning, you don't wash your hand before you start touching her food. She'd give you the look. And you go, ah, yeah, okay, you run and go do it. And I grew up with all those things, taking it for granted, and I realized since I became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, all the issue around school is also about hygiene, water, clean clothes, clean food. It prevents people to be sick unnecessarily. And what also that I realized is when we do the campaign from the UN different agencies to prevent AIDS, to prevent diarrhea, all those disease, malaria, all the messages are made in French or English. And most of the women in the village, they don't speak French or English. So therefore, the message don't go to the people that need to get the message. Now again, education comes to mind. How did my mother know about the truck? What days? What month? And she keep a book where she write every vaccination, every disease. I mean, sometimes I look at my mom, I'm like, gee, why aren't you a doctor, man? Leave me alone. But she said, you gotta be healthy. We have a well in the center of the house. People, most of the time, they clean the wells once a year. My mom will do it three times a year. My father has been complaining, you're not paying for it. He said, I don't care. We drink from this water. Because the running water comes very late. As a kid, young girl, I used to go to the fountain and get the water on my head and bring it back home, and we have to drink those water. And for me, a women's education, girls' education, have a lot of things that come into it. Preventing abuses is knowing and understanding your rights. You don't understand it, you don't go and trial anybody. The girl that is educated will become a mother that will educate the boys differently. I'll give you again the example of my mother. With 7 boys, she managed to teach them how to cook and clean their own room. At the beginning, they were like, no. I'm like, Who said that a woman is your slave or servant? You gotta do it. If your wife is sick, you gotta be able to help. I don't want any woman to go through what I went through when I married your father. He cannot even boil water. Hell no, you're doing it. And then she has the whole family of my father on her case. What are you trying to do to our boys? You making them a woman or what? My mom said, I'm making them independent and respectable men. And my brothers, they can cook. They can even hem. Me, when it comes to sewing, don't call me. I can knit, I can cook, but sewing, I'm out of it. So my hems, I go to my brother, I say, can you do it? Okay? Take it, iron it, cut it, do it. I'm like, how do you do it? He showed me 20 times. I can't still do it. Don't do it. I can't do it. I don't like it. So that's the kind of men that women that are educated will raise for the future. And my brothers, my father always tell them, you raise a hand on a woman, don't come back in this house. I don't know you anymore. You are not mine. So I've never seen my mom and dad having an argument that ended up being violent, ever. My father said to us, your brain is your ultimate weapon. Use it. It's not a spaghetti that you have to eat. If you cannot discuss with somebody, and the end have to end up being a physical fight, you both have lost. So I come from that background. For me, educating the girls in Africa is not only a passion, it's a life experience. We spend a lot of money in primary education. But still, secondary education and tertiary education gonna create the next generation of leaders that we need in Africa. If we do not do that, that's where I come from. I do Batonga because I believe that secondary education is important. When a mother comes to me in Tanzania and said, you've campaigned for primary education. I've seen your PSAs. But now, my girl is 1 year away from finishing primary education. She wants to continue. How do we do it? And then I'm like, oh, I never thought about this. At the same year, Wangari Maathai received the Nobel Peace Prize. And I learned that she has had a scholarship from the John Kennedy organization. So that's what Batonga is about. I give tuition, uniform, tutoring, mentoring, and I want to give them a meal a day because they come from a very, very poor background. The challenge, though, are finding great teachers. We have to give an education to those girls that are based on their own reality. They have to know their own reality to be able to be citizens of the world. And to conclude, I always say that music is the weapon of peace. And education with music will make this world a better place. There cannot be any help to anybody in the world if when you want to help somebody, there's no human connection. If you do it out of guilt, if you do it to feel better, it doesn't change anything. People that you are helping, that you want to help, have to be part of that help and have to be part of that change. Thank you so much.